It.
Hello, Ole.
Hi, Alexandra. Thank you so much for inviting me again.
Yeah, and thank you that you had the time to speak with me today. And we will do two videos. And could you please introduce yourself, even for those who maybe still don't know you?
Well, I've been, I think, at all the different conferences in Prague that you have been part of arranging, which is wonderful. I've dedicated some 35 years of my life trying to find out what is going on in the world, and this has taken me especially into the areas of top political assassinations and so-called false flag operations, state-sponsored terrorism. And I've been traveling around many countries, trying to on location understand what actually took place. And it's taken me, it's almost like I educated myself as a forensic detective, and so this is what I have specialized in, and also where I've been able to predict, I think it's 15 now planned false flag attacks, and I also been part of stopping a few just by understanding the templates they're using, their methods they're using, and also this bizarre habit they have of leaving clues about upcoming attacks, which is a blessing to us. But over the years, I've specialized in the Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Olof Palme, many of these, and I've written 4 books, one of them about the assassination. It's called Coup d'etat in slow motion, part 1 and 2. It's about the assassination of Olof Palme, but with all the connection into this global agenda, the New World Order, and how many of these assassinations are connected as well, carried out by the same little team. And I've done, I think, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 international interviews. I've been to 13 different countries at conferences, and I was also adopted by the Apache Nation last year. So I'm doing what I can to help this world to the next level of beauty.
Yeah, and Prague Peace Prize, but it's just a little thing. You have received Prague Peace Prize 2000.
I have indeed, and that is, I was very happy about that, because it's important for me that I'm not sort of just digging around in conspiracies and murder cases and so on, but my intention is always how to create peace, how to lift this world, empower as many as I can, and help people get their power back and get back in balance in their inner. And also, there's so many talking about inside jobs. I would say that peace is an inside job as well, that we have to start within. We have to go into these and understand what's going on, look at all of these very dark things, so that we can identify the problem. But the solution is always inside, and especially when it comes to how to deal with it. And I believe that it's extremely important that we deal with these things in a peaceful manner, in a peaceful way, so that we don't use the same language that they're using it against us, which is control and violence and death and destruction, but that we transcend this whole thing in a whole new way and follow the words of Mahatma Gandhi and other incredible individuals like that, that have shown us that it's actually possible to do this. And so I try to walk in his footsteps and do my best.
Yeah, and people find you on lightonconspiracies.com, and your YouTube channel is Ole Dammegard.
It's true. Also, I'm also on Twitter. My Facebook page is like almost like an underground hub when it comes to especially drills, because in these false flag operations, the drill is always, more or less always, part of the setup. So by finding where they carry out these drills, we also have a possibility to expose them before they even happen, because I try to send people on location with cameras and so on, filming the people who, while they're setting these operations, putting them activating them. And so by instead of always being one step behind, this is one way that we can become one step ahead instead, and then stop it, because that's the main thing.
And you actually helped us also here last 1 week ago. Previous weekend, there was a planned huge false flag operation here in Czech Republic, where I am. And because many people, several people has reacted, inclusive myself, that it was one drill about terrorism with the name Demon, another drill also in Prague, quite huge drill, which was named Základna 2018. Základna, it's the same name as base. It's the same word as the base, or Al Qaeda. It's the same word, isn't it? And 2018 and 18, who knows the satanic way of theirs? It's 666. 6 plus 6 plus 6. So people have reacted, and there were other clues, other warnings. So we understood that during the 2 days that NATO was here in this country on 15th and 16th of September, that they are planning false flags. So we have written to police and prevented it, I believe. And it was because we have learned from you, when it's drill, be careful. And people have written to me, watch up this, because there is something fishy here. So I believe that we have been able to stop it, to prevent it, a huge, probably with coup d'etat, or huge problem for Czech people. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, I'm very happy if anyone can use what I try to share, if they can use it, especially in an efficient way that you're talking about. That's amazing. Because once we start understanding how the templates are being used, they're quite simple. I never found these templates sort of like in a written form. It's only because I've looked into so many different cases that I've started to see a very clear pattern of how these things are carried out. And so that is what I'm been trying to share, not sometimes the details of the operations, but how the template is constructed, what are the ingredients and so on, because then anyone can start seeing it for themselves, and also then become active in stopping it.
Yeah, and the way I write to police, even though I know the up there in police and army knows about it, it's the people they are preparing the false flag, but it's to prevent it. If you will write that there is a false flag in planning, they have to stop it. And these people are involved. They have to stop it, because then how could I know? And then it happens. So if I say that I write to police, it's not that I would believe, I would be so naive that they will do something against the whole problem. We are the one, as I view it, who has to prevent, stop, like to do the prevention job later. But now it's just to stop the false flag when it's like within 2 days. But the proper job, we have to talk about it, what we do for the future. It's not like it's going on like one false flag after the other. I would like to highlight one particular lecture that you have done on the false flag in Norway, Anders Breivik, and how Jens Stoltenberg, the general, like in NATO, was most probably involved. He must have been. So I would like to highlight this lecture about the terror in Norway, and I will put a link also in the description, because it's great, isn't it?
The lecture is called When Terror Struck Norway, and it is exactly like you say. Stoltenberg was one of the key players in this whole thing, but it was a much bigger operation. And it's when, to understand what's going on, you have to look above national borders. It's not a matter of what is going on in Norway or Czech Republic or England or the US. They're coordinated. and the forces that are carrying these out is NATO, the US. You got backed by Saudi, Israeli money, different intelligence agencies, but also they use a lot of assets from the Gladio network as well to carry out these operations. So I think it's fantastic what you and other people are doing, because it's, whenever it comes to crimes and criminality, it can only be carried out in the dark. That's one of the key things with crimes or organized crimes, that they can only function in the dark, in the shadows. If we aim the light at them, if we switch on the light in the dark and say, listen guys, we see you, they are neutralized. They cannot continue, because the whole thing is based on us not understanding what's going on. So this is why my website is Light on Conspiracies. You know, aim the light at them and let the light do the work, let the truth do the work, and let's stop them. Let's just neutralize them by identifying them and just putting them up against the wall with the light right at them, saying, we see what you're up to. Now back off, leave us normal people alone, let us get back and have a life the way it's supposed to be, instead of all the time being messed up with greedy, dark individuals like these. So it's fantastic. We're making a big difference, I think, by exposing these things, and also having the courage, like yourself. I mean, you are a very, very brave individual, I think, and by aiming the light and facing these ones, just saying, you are not capable to continue this, because now we know who you are. We're making you personally responsible for what you're involved in, and stop it. Stop it. We've had enough.
Yeah, a very brave person would be with us today, and within this conference of Internet Fritz Springmeier. I have no contact with him since 12th of July, and I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know if he has been blackmailed or threatened. I have got blackmail about his son, youngest son. I have informed you and Sandra Pecht and others. Since then, I haven't heard from him, so I hope he's safe, really. And he has been brave because he has talked about the head of Illuminati, who has talked openly about the head of Illuminati on the side of good. It was Fred Springmeier. Well, I have talked about him, but about William, but I hope that Fritz Springmeier is safe, and I hope that he or somebody else will write to me that he's safe, he's in Kansas, he's okay. But he has been very. I would like to talk also about that. You know a lot about the connection between the Secret Service, intelligence agencies, and music industry, and then also the Group 40, or how you call it. It was an interview, or it was a video on David Icke's YouTube channel some months ago about Flower Power 60s, and that we have been naive. So you know a lot how it works between these music industry, secret service, intelligence, and drugs and wars. And could we talk about it?
Of course. And I think one of the main figures when it comes to this research is a man that I had the privilege of getting in touch with. His name was Dave McGowan. Unfortunately, he died very young. I think he was only 54 when he died from cancer, but he did incredible research. And he's written several books. One is called Program to Kill, about the creation of serial killers, which also goes hand in hand with this in this area. And there's another one called Secrets of Laurel Canyon, something like that. The title is similar to that. But it's the area he's talking about, the location he's talking about, Laurel Canyon, was a very, very interesting little, it's a tiny little area in a hilly location just north of Hollywood. I mean, it's very, very close. It's just a few kilometers up the road. And it's there's like villas around this this mountain road. There's a tiny little town type of thing. But I mean, it's tiny. But when you look at what happened in this little area, it's incredible. Because in the early 60s, when so many of these things happened, I would say that the assassination of JFK was sort of the start point for so many operations. That was one of the major steps forward for the deep state when they got rid of Kennedy. Because from then on, you suddenly start seeing how the CIA, FBI are being given free reins. They can just go wild. Many of the experiments with MK Ultra and drugs and all types of things are suddenly being amplified. And it seems like the people behind the New World Order, whoever they are at the very top, but one of the things that they focused on is what area they need to control to be able to control the population, invisible control, how to get to the subconscious, how to get to the mind of the man in the street and control them without them knowing it. Because you've got like hard weapons, like bullets and sticks and knives and rifles, cannons, whatever, but you've got soft weapons as well. And sometimes soft weapon is like psyops and propaganda and so on, where you can in some countries you need to use, or they have used very brutal force in many South American countries and so on, when they've just gone in, did a military coup, backed their own new leader for whatever country they were taking over. But the problem is when you go in with armed forces, you have like the possibility of guerrilla movements, you have demonstrations, you have riots, you have mass arrests that will lead to mass arrests, that will lead to execution, that it gets really, really messy. So they have tried to learn from their mistakes, and instead they try to do it in a psychological way to control us. So how to do that? And some of the main areas that they focused on is media. If you control the information in mainstream media, you really control a lot. Movies, because the whole film industry, people love movies, and so that's a perfect way to get to the subconscious of mind of an ordinary person. And through the music industry, because that is also the same thing. And that's also how to get to the younger generations, is through the music industry. So especially in the early 60s, like they took out Kennedy in November 63, and right after that there was this like almost explosion in a different area, where you had the Beatles made their big breakthrough in the US in early 1964, only a very few months after the Kennedy assassination. And quite a few researchers nowadays claim, and I'm one of them, that the Beatles was actually not just an ordinary pop band or boy band, but they were a creation of the Tavistock Institute in London. This institute has had a major impact on the world, and most people have no idea about it. The Tavistock Institute has focused on how to control the mind of the population on a global scale, more or less, finding methods how to persuade and push the mind of the population in whatever direction they choose to. And it seems like many of the songs that the Beatles are said to have written it wasn't actually them who wrote it. but that these many of these incredible songs were actually created by experts inside the Tavistock Institute, there to design the future development of society. And so Beatles seem to have been a diversion away from the Kennedy assassination, also because it was such a traumatic thing. Then suddenly, She Loves You, yeah, 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 we look over there, mass hysteria, and so on. And then from then on, 64 to 69, it's only 5 years. But in those 5 years, you had the whole explosion of rock and roll. You had, I mean, in 63, people were shocked about the haircuts that the Beatles had. I mean, like this. And then 5 years later, it was sex, drugs, rock and roll, LSD trip, all of it, flower power, hippie movements, all of that in 5 years. It's incredible. It's just how you can totally expand into these areas in only that short while. And now, when you look at how this was accomplished, it was especially this Laurel Canyon just north of Hollywood, where it became like a center, an epicenter of this whole rock and roll explosion. And in this tiny little hilly area, you had, it was like an invisible magnet that was pulling out all of these to become rock stars. Many of them couldn't even play. They had no talents whatsoever, but they were drawn by coincidence into this little area with Frank Zappa in the middle, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Jim Morrison, The Doors, many, many others. Jimi Hendrix came there to visit, the Stones, Beatles, all of them were dragged in there. Joni Mitchell, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, and so on. But they were being pulled in there, and all of these bands were created like boom, 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 a new band, a new band, a new band. And they didn't have equipment. I mean, it was very expensive equipment in those days, and they were sort of fighting society. They were standing up like this. And yet you had like very established record companies like CBS and so on, who was just signing deals with them and promoting them and doing all kinds of things that the establishment would officially totally disapprove of. So very strange how that came along. And also you had like studio musicians that did a lot of the recordings on many of these albums. So it wasn't even the bands that were playing on it. It was studio musicians. And then it was just the band's photos on the cover, and yet another band that made it through. So, but that's one thing. I mean, okay, all of these bands came out of nowhere into Laurel Canyon, and it was just like a big factory line of rock stars that just was being pumped out. And that is, of course, possible. But then what has come forward in later years is that in the center of this whole thing, there was this military installation, CIA operated, called the Lookout Mountain. And there, the CIA had, I mean, it was super, super secret, but they had massive big film studios that was producing more films than Hollywood itself, even though we officially have never seen any of it. And you had people like Frank Sinatra, you had Marilyn Monroe, many of these, John Wayne, were signed up for doing work there. What work? I mean, officially, these film studios never existed, but also it was from the Lookout Mountain where a lot of the LSD was being manufactured through the CIA operations and so on in laboratories, and then spread out for free at many of these new festivals like the Woodstock, the Monterey festivals. In the tens of thousands of LSD trips were given out for free. And that was part of hooking up that whole generation in this sex, drugs, and rock and roll mentality, where suddenly people totally lost interest in trying to stop the Vietnam War or try to influence normal politics, especially in the US and so on. And was just focused on sex, drugs, rock and roll. at the same time as the US were almost at civil war. I mean, there was the whole civil rights movement, there was the black and white struggle, poor man, rich man struggle. There was riots and a lot of very, very difficult things going on in the US. And that's also why these dark forces were struggling really to keep the control. And while doing this, as well as creating all of these things in the music business and so on, they also took out some main threats the way they saw it. Like we had JFK, we had Malcolm X, then we had Martin Luther King in April '68, and just a month later, Robert Kennedy in '68, in June '68. And I believe that that the idea, Robert Kennedy was he was straight going towards the White House as the next upcoming president. And the idea, I believe, was that Robert Kennedy wanted Martin Luther King as vice president. And that combo had been the end of the deep state. And so they killed him.
And then it was also resistance against the Vietnam War at that time, and JFK was against the war. And then what we know, that in the coffins of the soldiers went drugs to United States from Vietnam, heroin, and so Alfred Lambremont Weber talks about it. Yeah, so it's like connected. CIA was involved in the murder of JFK and involved in the music industry. There they promoted drugs, and they took the drugs from Vietnam, that the war that they have also helped to create. Yeah,
it was
like
the Vietnam War is something totally different than most people think. I think the general idea is that this was an American war there to stop communism from spreading, but it was actually a French war that the US took over, and it hadn't even started until Kennedy was murdered. It was they had the military advisors there, a few thousand. I can't remember how many thousand, but I mean nothing like the war itself. But the minute Kennedy was killed, I mean, the very next day, Lyndon Johnson signed the documents that actually started the Vietnam War for the American part. And one of the main reasons for this war was the drugs. That was it. Because the drugs they were produced in the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia. So the whole question was how to get the drugs from there into the West, into the US and the Western world. And so one of the ways they did it, they used Air America, the CIA airline, but also other commercial airlines, because they were sending like thousands of soldiers going to Vietnam, but they were also sending thousands of dead soldiers going back in coffins, and these coffins were perfect for the transportation of these drugs. And sometimes, I'm sorry about the gruesome details, but sometimes they even cut open the bodies of these dead soldiers and packed them with drugs inside, stitched them up, send them home, and then when they arrived in military planes to military bases in the US, these bodies were cut open, the drugs was taken out, and then after that, these dead corpses were delivered to the families of these grieving families. So gruesome, gruesome, gruesome.
And then continued money laundering, I guess, through the biggest banks
it's
for the Illuminati.
It's so multi-layered.
So the income of the drugs.
It's so multi-layered, and these things go hand in hand. You know, it's like minerals, metals, like gold, silver, uranium. You got organ illegal transports, you got oil, you got weapons, drugs. All of these things are sort of like going in
Child trafficking,
organ trafficking, you name it, pedophile rings. It's like the way the New World Order have set up the world. It's like there are three power centers in the world, at least the way I see it. The financial center is in the old city of London. You got the so-called religious center, whatever that means, in the Vatican, and you got the war center in Washington, D.C. And so they don't see the world as different countries, like France is doing that, England is doing that. They see it as a chessboard, and countries are just like franchises or bricks in this game that they can move around and do whatever they want with. And so it's the same with these power centers also, that things are being sent in all different directions between these different. So you will have the Vatican is just as involved with weapons and pedophile trafficking and oil and terror attacks and whatever as Washington is, because it's all being financed through the financial center, and so it's going like this in a triangular motion. So it's. And when you look at the world in total, when you look at what is called the deep state, or what is called the New World Order, it is an octopus. It really is like an octopus with tentacles going in many different areas, but actually it comes back to the very same base, which is good news for us, because instead of us living in a mad world with horrific things all over the place, we are living in a beautiful world, but with a massive, very ugly octopus, power octopus, that is there trying to control us. So
yes.
whatever you look into, if it's chemtrails or vaccinations or pedophile trafficking or assassinations or wars or you name it, whatever you look into, HARP, geoengineering, you will, the more you dig into it, it will lead you back to the same place. So this is why I focus on one area, where I try to become as laser-like and direct as possible in my little area. Or it's not that little actually, but in my area, because the deeper we get to it, if we can get to the root somewhere and pull out the roots of this evil, it will help dissolve the whole thing. It will just fall apart.
Yeah, and then you have other organizations that have also immunity, that you can smell that it's something really fishy, and it's Bank of International Settlements. They are immune, and CERN, which the head of Illuminati is threatening with a false flag. He said that it's beginning of the end for humanity, and it's CERN Hoover Dam false flag, CERN Hoover Dam attack, he calls it, and he describes how it will happen, and it's worse than many nuclear weapons. And it's open on the internet. He's threatening with it, and CERN has immunity. Why do you think that they have immunity? There is something fishy. So,
Alexander, I mean, have you got immunity? No.
no.
Have
No.
I got immunity? No.
No.
So what does that mean? How can you give somebody immunity, and for what reason? The reason is because they're deeply involved in heavy shit, you know, very ugly, and they're very afraid of being exposed. Once again, switch on the light, we see you. If we see and understand what's going on, these organizations or whatever would be, I mean, put away forever if the legal system was working. But here they make very, very sure that we can't even raise our fingers against them. So I think it's a very good indication that something is totally rotten. And it's the same. It's the same with these presidents, that the last thing they do is give, you know, what do you call it? Immunity for the all the people they have been working with, and the former president, when the new one comes in, the first one he gives is immunity to the old one, and so they're covering each other's butt because they're serious, serious criminals, really massive criminals.
Yeah.
So, and very interesting. If you listen to Voltaire, he said, if you want to find out who controls you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. Very, very important one, I think.
Yeah, it's very important. And if you look at the homepage of Deborah Tavares and her associate, stopthecrime.net, you have two documents there that are very important. It's a Bilderberg group, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and you can see that they are like they will mind control us, they will keep us busy so we don't see what's happening, they will kill us with soft kill. Why is Bilderberg group still allowed? You have EU Parliament. Well, why don't they shut it down? What is Nazism? You kill people in genocide people, and what is this that it's allowed? Group like Bilderberg Group is allowed when you have the papers, the documents against them. And the other document was NASA warfare or NASA document from July 2001, before 9/11, where they are saying that they will use CNN to mind control us, how they will kill us with soft weapon, and it's Department of Defense, so-called Department of Defense of the United States, and also Australia and other agencies. And you have a document which you can use against them in the international court. But like our Swedish, have lived in Sweden, both of us, for a long time. So the Swedish Prime Minister was, I believe, in Bilderberg Group. What is he doing there? Why doesn't he shut the group down and declare it illegal?
It's just a very good proof of what's going on here, because if you had, for instance, the World Championship of football, of soccer, and there were secret meetings going on with all the owners of the teams, with all the trainers, with some of the players, with the financial backups, with the advertisers. If there were secret meetings before the World Championship, it would be a massive scandal, because people would say, what the hell is going on? Are they rigging it? There would be, that is what I believe, that there would be an incredible reaction if that was exposed. But here, which is 5 times worse, where you got like leaders of countries meeting in secrecy with other leaders and politicians and bankers and you name it, in Google and in all very dangerous areas of politics and national security, and nobody is raising a finger. They even denying that this group even existed up until 2013. I think that was the first time when they actually had to say, well, actually the Bilderberg Group exists. It has been here since 1954. And no, it's totally illegal. What these people are doing is treason. They should be tried as traitors to their country. And people like you were talking about Sweden, like Carl Bildt, that is the face of a super, super, super criminal. I don't care that he looks very nice and nerdy and he says things in a way that people say, oh, I really like him because he tells you the way it is. No, he tells you absolute BS, but to divert your attention away, and as a perfect politician, play ping pong with your brain so that he will not be put up against the wall and ask, what the hell is going on here, Dr. Bildt? He's not even a doctor, but if you look at him, for instance, he's a typical example of how a so-called politician is also part of creating wars in other countries like Somalia, Eritrea, that war where in the involvement of the oil industry there, where they're committing horrific crimes against the population. And it's just, nobody cares. Nobody's looking into it. Or you have the Balkan War, where he was also deeply involved through the Bilderberg group, where all of it was arranged before the war even broke out. The whole settlement with the Daytona Agreement, everything, that was all set. And then this whole thing was carried out. I believe one of the reasons where the Balkan War was based on the old problem, reaction, solution, for the UN troops to look absolutely useless, because the UN were allowed in there, but they weren't allowed to fire a shot. They weren't given ammunition. They were only allowed to be there and write down reports. Well, these people got raped and they chopped the head of these, and that was the only thing they were allowed to do. They looked dangerous, but they couldn't do anything. And so the idea was problem, reaction, solution. The UN troops are useless. That's the problem. And we go, oh my God, something needs to be done. And boom, in comes the creation of the world army. That's what they're trying to do, the creation of combining the US military with NATO and the UN, these troops together in one world army, there to control us, not to protect us. So
and we have seen, you and me, in Sweden, there were quite a lot of false flag operations during our time we have lived there. So it was quite using, and how the society, the Swedish society, was demoralized successfully, and now they are saying it's just the immigration. Well, everything was planned in advance, so it's much deeper. Yeah, what's going on and why it happened to Sweden. It's not the immigrants from beginning. It's yeah, the forces, Freemasons, and so on. And
if you look, when you talk about immigration, this is something I've known about, this planned mass invasion here since late 1990s, something like that, that this was the plan. I mean, you read books by David Rockefeller or Stravinsky, whatever his name is, Stravinsky. I can never remember his name.
Stravinsky.
Yeah, but if you look at their books, they've been talking about it. George Soros as well, that this is the way to destroy, invade, conquer, divide and conquer, and with mass invasion. So it's very simple. It's George Soros backed, and it's just trying to destroy nations in different ways. Some nations in the Middle East and so on, with military force, they go in and liberate them. Military force totally destroy them, take over, plunder, rape, everything, and then also charging for rebuilding the whole thing, and leave their military bases there so they're in total control. But other countries, like here in Europe, they had to do it in a different way. And so it's like this mass invasion, but at least what we have been told, of immigrants. I truly believe that the numbers are heavily amplified. I mean, the numbers we are being given about refugees, about crimes done by refugees, crime statistics on the whole is just totally not true. We're just being served these numbers, and it's being pumped out through news agencies like Associated Press and Reuters, both of them owned by Rothschild. And they can write whatever they want because nobody has the time to check the facts. And I've been in contact with both police in Sweden and in the US, asking them about the crime statistics in these different countries. And the people I've spoken to say they are just not true at all. The number of rapes, the number of robberies, the number of homicides, it's not. It's not at all the way we're being told. And also, you have, oh, this happened in Germany, that happened there, and the immigrants. We're being fed the exact same news in all Western European countries. I can tell you that because I've been interviewed in many countries here in Europe, and I've said many times, you know, if I'm being interviewed in Poland or Serbia or something like that, I say, I know I don't speak your language. I can't read what you write in your newspaper, so I can still tell you exactly what it will say. And they're like, how can you do that? Well, because it's coordinated. And so what you would be reading about wherever you are in Europe at the moment is the problem with the immigration, the alleged terror attacks, and Allah Akbar, Muslim threat, that the immigration is the major problem. All these crimes and the rapes, mass gang rapes, you name it, is being blamed a lot. That the finances are going down, that people are being, there's the financial pressure is more and more. At the same time, blaming it also on the immigrants, because you will see people coming in from nowhere compared to like, I'm sure in the Czech Republic, the old people will have a very hard time financially, hospitals, schools. I'm sure it's the same for all these different countries. But the immigrants are being treated like princes, and you know, here, please have a 5-room bedroom with a perfect view over the river. At the same time as normal Czech people have to struggle to pay for a 1-room. And it's done by design to get the emotions going, you know, to that this is not fair, and it's not. But who is deciding it? Is it the immigrants, or who is doing it to us? And that's where we get into the corruption in politics, and where people in the government are doing it according to a joint agenda, the same for all the different countries, where it's a matter of dissolving the nation, dissolving the national identity, dissolving races, dissolving religions, dissolving families, dissolving languages, and dissolving sexes as well. The whole sexual thing. I mean, how many genders are there now? Really? It's like, is it 30? Come on, what's going on? It's bizarre. It's bizarre. And it's done there to confuse us, to dilute our mind, and just make us so like, there's nothing left to hold on to, done by design. And if you have a problem with immigration, stop bombing their countries, then they would stay home.
Yes, yes. And they want to cause chaos, and then chaos order out of chaos, the totalitarian new world order out of chaos. So
that's the standard, that's the plan. It's been like that for a long time. They want to destroy the old. It's called the New World Order. Destroy the old, crush it, and out of the ruins, you sometimes have the symbolism of there's an egg, you know, standing in the ruins and the rubble of the old society with a chopped up head of the king or whatever, and there's an egg, a reptilian egg or egg, but with a Freemasonic black and white pattern on it, just waiting there, because when the time is right, the egg opens up and boom, the New World Order, whatever that means. So
I would just say also the riots in Sweden. I don't know if you have seen it. I believe it was 2013. FBI chief came to Sweden. Shortly after that, there were the riots that the immigrants would have caused, and we have seen videos of people who has been offered 7,000 Swedish crowns to participate as actors, crisis actors. It was fake. So
this is the thing. I was not there, so I can't say for sure, but I've heard exactly, I heard testimonies of people who were paid by the newspapers to go and lit up some cars, put them on fire. Also, we see, oh, look here in Gothenburg, They were like, I don't know, we see these people running around all dressed in black, turning cars on fire. I can't remember the number of burned cars in Gothenburg, they said, but it was like 89 or something. But when you look at it, maybe it was in multiple places, I don't know. But when you look at this specific video that is said to be the proof of what is going on, there's a handful of cars. So that's awful. So who is putting them on fire? And in the article, you straight away get it, it's the immigrants. I would say it's people in black clothes with masks on. Who are they? Are they possibly? They could be immigrants. I mean, that is a very clever way of doing. If you've just come to a new country, you're waiting for permission to stay, let's go and burn some cars. That is a perfect way of getting your ass kicked out of the country. There's no logic to it in my humble way of seeing it. But if you have infiltrators that want to stir the emotions, blame it on the immigrants, get the whole thing going, that is a perfect way of doing it. You burn some cars, you blame them, and you get the whole commotion going. It's a standard procedure, Psyops on a very basic level. So for us, it's a matter of asking ourselves and finding out what is going on, what is the problem, and who is doing it to us. Either Muslim terrorists or immigrants in the thousands, possible, or are we being played? And if there was such a problem with immigration, why don't you just block the borders and say, I'm very sorry, here in Sweden or Denmark or whatever, we have enough. We have a lot of problems because we've let in too many of you. Very sorry, but at this point we need to close the door until we sort out our own mess here. But no, that is not what we see. We see more and more commotion. Let's open the doors even more. Bring them in, bring them in. And you get all of this racism and hatred under the surface bubbling. You know, it's so unfair, and look at them, and my God, they're Muslims and they're black and they're whatever. And then you give permissions for mosques to be built right in the center of cities. So you have the 5 o'clock in the morning. What better way to stir the emotions? Get people pissed off and so frustrated, so angry because they're under such a pressure with debt and work and anyway, and then they can't even be led so they can get a good night's sleep because of the prayer tower. I'm not saying anything about mosques. I mean, please keep your mosque, and it's a holy place, fantastic, but in the right location and where the idea is peace and cooperation and friendship between religions and neighbors and so on. But when you do it like that, that is how to create a bomb. You get the ingredients, you put them together, you stir it up, and then you just need a little spark to ignite the whole thing. And that is what they're stirring up, so that in the end, drop the spark and boom, and you got a civil war or a destroyed nation. And they even been kind enough to make agreements with Norway, so that should anything go down in Sweden, then Norway have said no to accept refugees from Sweden, Swedish citizens. At least that is what I've been informed. So look at it from a bigger point of view. I would very much like to warn Sweden about what's going on, because I think Sweden is being messed around with big time at this point. So for a long time in Sweden, there was these specific, it's not a mortgage, but it's a bank loan. It's called ROT-avdrag. That was at least what it was called in the old days, where people can get really good bank loans for renovating and tax, what do you call it, tax reduction for renovating their homes. So Sweden has been renovating houses like mad. I mean, I don't know anyone in Sweden who hasn't changed their bathroom or kitchen twice or fixed this and fixed that. So the standard of housing and real estate in Sweden is super high. But also, people are under so much debt. So it's right under the surface that it looks perfect. It's a beautiful country. You go there It's the nice world order. It's everything is organized and beautiful and so on. But under the surface, something different is going on. So you've got people under such heavy financial pressure. You got the whole stirring thing with the immigration and crimes, and the country is just going down the drain. And then the only thing you need to do, you also made it illegal to be living in the streets. That's very kind of them. So the only thing you need to do is raise the mortgage rate just 3, 4, 5%. Oh, we're very sorry, but unfortunately, boom, it's like that. Thousands of people will have to leave their housing overnight. And where are they going to go? They're not allowed to live in the street. They can't go to the neighboring country. It's like mayhem. And then the bankers that are the head of the snake can just start to pull in all of this real estate that is in super high quality, where the slaves have renovated them for the masters, so they don't have to do anything. This is pure speculation, but I've had this feeling for a long time when it comes to Sweden, that is the plan. And I hope I'm totally wrong, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Ole, we will talk, we have talked to Jim Fetzer, and shortly in half an hour, we will talk with Ole with Cody Snodgrass, and then later we will continue our discussion between you and me also, because it's some other thing I would like to talk about, or that you talk about. So thank you so much for this hour, and we'll continue later. Or is it something that you would like to add before we...
Yes, I would very much like to say thank you to you, Alexander, for creating these conferences and giving a platform for this type of information to get out there. And also for your courage. I know that you have been put on a lot of pressure, and they've tried to do not so very nice stuff to you. So I really applaud your bravery, and thank you for creating this thing.
Thank you, Ole. I thank you what you have done for us and help us with the false flags.
Anyway, so I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.